Hello everyone, Lisa Haverly here in Nature Superhero Network, and this is part 2 about what we have control over as interventionists, as occupational therapists. And so we talked about in part 1 that we oftentimes are looking to adapt or change or shift the environment, right? The context. And of course, if we are doing therapy in nature because we have deemed that to be a more supportive context, that we are already adapting it right there as we consider nature, right? And of course, we can make some shifts in nature too if we need to have little nooks that, or enclosed spaces that provide some sense of security, that we might do some adapting or modifying there even, okay? But this part 2 is really thinking about how we look to modify, adapt, occupation or tasks that are required of the clients that we serve, okay? And how do we often do that? Well, we analyze it first, right? That's kind of OT 101, where we break it down and we look at the different steps and the different parts that are required to engage in that occupation, okay? And that we might use activities or the actual occupation itself to facilitate skills in that area. And so I think about then, what does that look like in nature? Is it different, right? Well, we still bring our clinical reasoning hats, we still bring our analytical skills, and we're often still working on the same functional skills, right? It just might be different maybe in the activities that we do, maybe different in the materials that we use, okay? But we might use an activity to get to a functional outcome. And oftentimes when I'm thinking about those activities in nature, that we're looking to bring in real natural materials. I mean, I think that's kind of a classic nature-based approach, that instead of pulling something off the shelf, that we are looking to nature to provide us with those materials, okay? So that's kind of one challenge that you might be thinking that might be different, that instead of pulling therapy putty off the shelf, that we might be thinking about, could we manipulate clay? Could we be digging in the soil or the earth or the sand, okay? To kind of work on maybe hand strengthening, for example. Okay, and so I think one kind of difference then in the nature context is that we are often looking to natural elements. So instead of a sensory bin that we might, create or produce in the indoors, right, that we could think about bringing in natural elements, right, that would look very different in an outdoor nature-based setting. Okay, that we aren't having to have maybe a tub of different textures and colors and maybe even scents, that nature has all of these elements that sometimes even we might be interacting with, and we get multiple sensory inputs at one time. So there's a little more complexity maybe already a part of the natural world. Hopefully that makes sense. And then when we think about some, working on those occupations, right? And so I think of a child and what are their occupations? Well, the activities of daily living, certainly, but there's also this occupation of playfulness. And does the context make a difference, right? And I think because I consider, and I think perhaps, if you are other nature-based therapists, I would love your input on this, that we really consider nature as a natural context, as a context and an environment where children usually naturally have an affinity for, right? And that's kind of grounded in that biophilia hypothesis, that we are drawn to nature almost intuitively. And I think this is what we're talking about when we think of nature as a natural space. But back to what we have control over. So we have control over how we might modify or adapt those activities and those occupations that we might be working on, okay? And in nature, we might actually be working on, for example, an occupation of gardening, where we can facilitate that occupation right there in the here and now. And that would be hopefully something that they could then generalize to their home environment. And I think of other occupations, and this might, we might think of just plant care, where we might be doing some trimming of hedges, if you or trimming the garden back. I mean, I've had clients actually do all of that, or some actual watering of the plants. And so really there's so many skills that can be encompassed into an activity, I think, when we are looking at collaborating with nature. And so, but we still have to bring in our clinical reasoning, and I think that's an important point to make, that it's not nature by itself that makes it therapeutic. It's nature as this beautiful context, sometimes the modality, right, that we can look to nature to kind of facilitate skills directly, where we can challenge that nervous system directly for, more integration to happen, but that we can also be working on actual skills that then could generalize or support occupations at home, which is more through activities, right? Which we're definitely aware of doing in other environments. But I think the difference when I think about how we might approach nature-based practice is really through thinking about utilizing and bringing in natural elements, okay? And looking to nature to provide us with material that we can bring in to this very authentic experience, where we're truly engaging with the natural world, connecting with the natural world in a way that then hopefully will afford some generalization to the natural world where they live, their backyard or another park, okay? And so I really see that as a powerful component of nature-based work. Would love your comments. Hope to see you down the road. And this was part 2. So stay tuned for part 3. Thanks so much. Bye.